Hello and welcome to the RedsReport. This is Barnsley FC's longest running podcast, sponsored by the Best of Barnsley, and we are proud to be part of the TalkSport network of fans. Steve's left us for this evening. He's going to the NEC. I told him he's too late for Crufts, but apparently there's some sort of home innovation show going off. Enjoy yourself, Steve. So we've upgraded him, basically. We've not even part-exed him. We've upgraded, because with us this evening is Rob Staton from BBC Radio Sheffield. Rob, thank you for joining us. Good evening. How are we doing?
Yeah, good evening. Thanks, guys. Yeah, really good. And really appreciate the invite to talk about what a great game that was the other night at Oakwell. Fantastic.
Yeah. And with us, as always, he might be from the wrong side of the Pennines, but he is Barnsley through and through. It's Ian from the Tykes blog. Ian, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Off my spell in Spain. I didn't come back and curse us when we come back after the winning run.
Yeah. The most difficult month for us this season was this month, and you decided to go to Spain and miss most of it.
I missed 3 matches, yeah.
And we, once we knew Sheffield Wednesday were still in the FA Cup, and this match was obviously postponed. We've been looking forward to it, about the spectacle and everything, and the run they were on and the run that Barnsley was on. Before we talk about the result and everything else, Rob, in your job, you've been all over looking at football matches. I might be biased. I think that's probably one of the best matches I've seen as an advert for League One football. People put their noses up at it, but I thought it was two teams that had blood, sweat, tears, game plans, whatever else they needed, and what a spectacle that was.
Yeah, I think it had everything that you could ever ask for as a fan, and it's the most enjoyable game I've watched this season by a long way. Both teams just gave absolutely everything. There were some good goals. It ebbed and flowed. It's that kind of game where you just couldn't take your eyes off it, and especially towards the end of the first half, where both teams, every time they went forward, they looked like they were going to score. So it was a fantastic game, real drama, amazing atmosphere. I always love going to Oakwell on the big nights, and I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. 10 out of 10. I think both teams deserve immense credit, and it's just the kind of football that I want to watch. I get there's probably a lot of people out there who will, and they're well within their rights to do this, sort of that lovely sort of Barcelona, Spain in the 2010s. They love to watch all that passing football. The people who will spend endlessly talking about how brilliant Lionel Messi is. Give me a Yorkshire derby on a Tuesday night with a bit of rain in the air in March any day. And I just thought that was amazing.
Yeah. And Ian, we couldn't have set it up any better, just with the run of forms they were on. This wasn't like one. Normally, these sort of ties are, Barnsley is fighting relegation. They need a miracle. The other team is in a 23-game unbeaten run. And, I know it's Sheffield Wednesday, and I know at times we talk about, that is a hell of an achievement, especially this season, because League One is a very, very strong league with some very big teams in there this season. So you have to give credit to them. They were hindered by a couple of injuries, and Barnsley, I suppose, had the luck, or whatever you want to call it, that our starting 11 has been pretty settled, hasn't it, over these last few weeks. Going into the match then, before kick-off, were you confident, Ian? Because, Wednesday, it's probably the team that everybody's looking at, or were looking at that time, just because of the run and the results they've been getting.
Eternal optimist, I'd have said just about. It could have been anything, couldn't it? Was it 2008 last time we beat them at Oakwell? So I was like, well, it's got to be due, hasn't it? And a bit like Rob was saying, in terms of the advert for League One, quite a few of my mates who follow different teams in different leagues were watching it because it was on Sky, and I've been banging on all season about Duff's Barnsley and the way they play and some of how the pressing, etc. And they watched it, and afterwards they were messaging me saying it was a great game, and it was a perfect advert for English football, for League One, and for both sides. But it could have been anything, couldn't it? It could have been. I thought there'd be goals, even though they were the two tightest defences, because I just thought neither side are going to sit and play for a draw. It was always going to be hammer and tong, wasn't it? I think.
Mm. You have to give defence. They always do. They sold their allocation out. The Barnsley fans, answered a rallying call from the new board to go and get behind the team, like they did against Derby, like they did against Plymouth and Portsmouth and everything else. I've heard a couple of interviews, Rob, that you've done, and the run that these two teams are having at the moment, there is something about both managers, isn't it? I can't help but like Darren Moore intensely. I really, really do. I think he's so honest. He's very, very open. Michael Duff has been the answer to many fans' prayers. So just a little bit about these managers. There's a couple of players in the Barnsley side that played last season that you don't recognise them. I talked earlier about upgrading Steve. Michael Duff has upgraded some of our players because it's not 5 or 10%. They look different players. What is he like when you speak to him? Because we just see this humble, it is, well, one game at a time and everything that he says. But even in the Sky interview afterwards, I don't know if was that you or was it, but it was like he comes over as so honest and so, I don't know, dedicated. Is that the word? What's your impression? What's your impression of him?
I just think he's absolutely fantastic. I love listening to him speak. I think he's an amazing communicator. He really mixes in the two kind of interviewing styles because, you're talking about Darren Moore there. Darren Moore doesn't give very much away in his interviews. We'll always go back to the game at a time type stuff. The stuff that you expect to hear from managers, and that's fine. And Michael Duff dabbles in a bit of that, but he sort of does an answer like that, and then every interview he has this answer where it ends up. It's sort of emotive, it's passionate. He speaks in a way that fans, you can just imagine fans nodding along to when he speaks about the approach of the players or what they're doing behind the scenes. It kind of makes you want to throw on a red shirt and go out and play for him, just sort of listening to him. I think he has done as good a job as any manager in the Football League this year because, and you guys will know it better than I and anybody else listening to this, really, that Barnsley was kind of a club on its knees when it got relegated last year. They'd had an awful season. They'd made 2 managerial appointments that didn't work. They were desperate. They needed a direction. They needed somebody who could just get their club by the balls, really, and just sort of sort it out, create a culture, create an identity. And to do that in a matter of weeks, which is what's happened, because this isn't just the run that's happened now. Barnsley have been playing well all year. To sort of turn it around very, very quickly, when he was admitting it was a rebuild in the summer, I think he's absolutely fantastic. I think he is a manager. If anybody from the Barnsley board happens to be listening to this, go and get a new contract, go and extend his salary, put in the small print that he can do whatever he wants, ask for his advice on how the club should be managed from top to bottom, give him any kind of power that he wants because he was basically in charge of everything at Cheltenham. If he wants that at Barnsley, give it to him. Try and find some money for him to spend in the summer, whether they're a Championship club or a League One club, and do whatever it takes to keep him at Oakwell for the long term. Because he just screams to me a manager who one day is going to be in the Premier League. And hopefully that's with Barnsley. And there's no reason why it couldn't be because the Reds were in the playoffs just a couple of years ago. So it's not ridiculous to think that could happen. But just keep him, because he's an absolute diamond of a manager. And you can just tell sometimes, blimey, we've interviewed a number of managers over the years in South Yorkshire, haven't we? Because the clubs keep changing them every year and we speak to so many. You just know when you're interviewing a good one. And Michael Duff is absolutely top class.
Yeah. Ian, it's besides the away match at Hillsborough early on the season, this is always the one that matters to the fans. And in the sort of like the pre-match interviews, it's a bit what Rob said. He's got this knack of saying things that just rally supporters. So he talks about how impressed he is and the quality that Wednesday have got in this 23-game unbeaten run. But then he finishes it, wouldn't it be great to break that? And as a fan, that fires you up, doesn't it? You want to get your coat on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, unless you're like me and you're working while 8. But you know what I mean. You want to go, don't you? You want to be part of that. That's probably the side that Barnsley have missed the most lately. And I'm not. The appointments were wrong, and the board probably recognised that. But there was a big divide, wasn't there, between the board, what happened on the pitch, and the fans. And one appointment has mixed these 3 ingredients. And there's no wonder, really, isn't it, that they're doing well? Because if you have the right manager with the right players, the fans will come, won't they? It feels different now being a Barnsley fan, doesn't it?
It does. It feels different from even like earlier in the season, September, October, when the crowds were dipping under 10,000 and it was a bit eerie, shall we say. But I think you can't beat getting bums on seats when you're playing good football. When, like Rob said, when you listen to him, I look forward to listening to his press conferences. Like you said, for the Wednesday game, he was talking up the 23 unbeaten run. He said he'd done it at Burnley, knew exactly what it takes to do that. But then he was also saying, I don't need to talk to our players about the magnitude of the game or anything. They'll feel it when they get off the coach. They'll feel the buzz at the ground. They were his words. So every time he speaks, you listen. And I've said it all season, he's been by far our best signing, without a doubt. And fair play to Martin Devaney and Martin Patterson as well, because I think the whole backroom staff seem to be pulling in the right direction. You only have to look at some of the clips that the club have put out since the game finished, like the little camera in the dugout, and or that show the togetherness. You look at like that fourth goal went in, and then Harry Isted's run the full length of the pitch and dived in the Ponty, and the subs have run on, Cole's run on. I'm surprised the ref didn't book them all, and it just shows that dressing room must be buzzing, that training ground must be buzzing, and he's generated that he must be that type of man that can put an arm around a player and get the best out of them. Sometimes he might need a rollicking, sometimes it's just an arm rounder, but he seems to get the right mix, because not one of those players comes off after 60, 70 minutes and spits the dummy out, and not one of them players who comes on for 20, 30 minutes then can't be bothered. They all put a shift in, and I think that speaks for how he sets that standard.
Rob, before we talk about the match itself, just explain to me, there's Andy Giddings, there's Adam Oxley, there's yourself. Barnsley are playing Sheffield Wednesday, two informed teams, South Yorkshire derby, Tuesday night. How does that work? Is that like scissors, paper, stones until you got two? Or is that somebody outranks somebody else? How do you decide who's, like, Wednesday are away? Is it Sunday at Forest Green? Is it like, sorry, I'm washing the hair? Or like, how does that work? Who decides who goes where?
Well, I wish I had some hair to wash. Maybe then I wouldn't be good at Forest Green on Sunday. What happens generally is we try and divvy it out as fairly as possible. So there are certain games like the South Yorkshire derbies that we try and distribute them evenly. And we have a meeting sort of once a month to divvy out the games. In this instance, Gids was off this week, and it made it quite easy that me and Adam could go and do it. But, we have big, it's like Sheffield United getting to Wembley in the FA Cup semi-final. It's looking like it's going to be on a Saturday when everybody else is playing. So there's going to be a difficult decision to be made there. How many of us can go to Wembley? Is it one? Is it two? Is it three? You don't know. So that's difficult. Can I just say one last thing about Michael Duff, though? Because I love talking about Michael Duff. I've really enjoyed sort of following his leadership at Barnsley. And I've always felt that Barnsley Football Club has got a unique connection to the town. I live in Rotherham. I'm from Rotherham. I've always lived in Rotherham, apart from when I briefly lived in Canada. And, I don't think Rotherham fans will mind me saying, I don't think there's the same connection between the town and the football club here that you find between Barnsley Football Club and the people of Barnsley. And when the football team's doing well, there's a real pride within the town in the football club and its achievements. And I think one thing that Michael Duff has done so well, and it's really underrated, and it's really easy to be a bit ham-fisted and get this wrong, and he's nailed it, is sort of just tapping into the culture of Barnsley folk and Barnsley Football Club, saying the kind of things that, because he's not from Yorkshire, he's not from South Yorkshire, he's not from Barnsley, but he's just bought into it all, hasn't he? And he just, the thing like the Kes thing on Twitter, just doing little things like that, it just gets everybody going. And you just think, this is such an impressive job. And he's just got this subtle, like just little things, like he don't go over the top. When they beat Wednesday the other night and they're showing the clips of him celebrating, he doesn't go over the top, but he just looks so bloody determined while he's enjoying, and he's punching the air. And you just think, you can see why he's got those players going, because he gets you going as a journalist, as a fan. You think, yeah, this is brilliant. And you kind of want someone like that to succeed. He is a very interesting manager to cover and follow. I want Barnsley to win promotion, obviously, because it's great for us to have Barnsley in the Championship. I want all of our teams to be doing as well as possible. But I extra specially want to see him succeed, because I just think it's great. And I just, you'd love to see, to interview him off the back of a promotion and all that comes with that. I think he's he has done an amazing job. There's really, for me, there's him, there's Mikel Arteta at Arsenal, and there's probably Paul Heckingbottom at Sheffield United, who were like the three, I'd say, are the three manager of the year contenders in English football. Arteta will probably win it just because it's the Premier League. But I tell you what, Duff, and he deserves a real shout for that because he's been fantastic.
He does. And I have to say, in the interview I did for Morecambe, I sort of said, I think especially up north, if you look at that north-south divide, in Barnsley, for a lot of people that go to Oakwell, life is not great. We all work bloody hard, for not a lot of money with everything that's going off with the energy crisis and cost of living and everything else. And we go to Oakwell at 3:00 on a Saturday or 7:00 or whatever on a Tuesday night, because that's our place of joy. That is the one thing. I know they've done the glass works and it looks lovely, but I don't really go to the cinema, so I'm not that bothered. We've got a Ben and Jerry's, which I suppose is really, our last loves Primark, but I don't go shopping. It's so Barnsley for me is where I live, and it's the football. For me, that is, so if the football does well, I feel better. You go to work better, you know what I mean? And that's been disconnected. The last couple of appointments, not because he's an English manager, but it just felt they came there to do a job, and there was a job on the pitch, and off the pitch there wasn't really that much. And I think the fact that he took him to the coal mining museum in Wakefield, like pre-season. If you want to know what maybe 60-70% of those people that are there on their connection is, it's because they'll have either themselves or relatives will have done that job. And the players, it's like Ian just said. Even the lone players that have come in, I think we're not. There's probably one player that said it's probably not worked out, lone player, and that's fair enough. And out of the ones we brought in, that's a decent percentage, isn't it? But it's not just about the football. I think he realizes the importance the football club is to the people that live. And I mean, listen, I know Brexit means Brexit. I had to apply to stay, but I class this as my hometown, and it just feels right. The reshuffle of the board, bringing Jean Crine back in, I think has been a blessing, because she'll know from Patrick's days what the football club should represent. We all want growth. We all might want to see something done with the West End and a better fan engagement and everything else, but we want to feel part of that. And for a long time, there was a huge disconnect, but it's getting a lot better. And no more better than. So let's talk about the match itself. I've not seen much of Wednesday because I'm a Barnsley fan. Was that a typical Sheffield Wednesday performance, do you think, Rob? Because you have to give them credit. You're 2-0 down in 15 minutes to come back and dominate. It takes balls, doesn't it? That tells you something about that team as well.
It wasn't a typical Wednesday performance because, they've set a club record for clean sheets this year, and they conceded 4 goals. So they've done a very good job, actually, of going to places like Fratton Park and facing Portsmouth, who were very physical that day and tried to create a bit of a battle, and just finding a way to get the job done and getting out with a 1-0 win. And, Barnsley didn't allow them to do that. I mean, I thought it was really interesting in that first 25 minutes, let's say. I thought Wednesday looked so panicked. It was the first thing I said when I started my commentary stint in the first half, was that Wednesday looked, they're seeing ghosts. Like, the pressing was so good that actually what was happening is defenders were playing the ball out to the midfield. And even when there wasn't a press on, the Wednesday players were like anticipating it and I've got to get rid of this as quickly as possible. And it was relentless, the work rate, and they just looked so frazzled. The goalkeeper made a bit of rush of blood to the head for the first goal, but then the second one, the defenders, because of the press, I don't know what to do with the possession. They've given it away. It's 2-0. And, Wednesday have not... It's hard to say whether that's typical Wednesday after that, because they've never really had to come from 2-0. They've lost 3 games. I mean, they've lost 4 games now, and 50% of those losses are to Barnsley. So they've not... One of the other losses was to Plymouth, and one was against Peterborough about 4 games into the season when they had a man sent off after 20 minutes. So they're not used to being in that kind of a position. So I think you give them credit for coming back into it. They got it back to 2-2. It could have gone either way then. But you also got to credit Barnsley. Barnsley stuck in there when it was 2-2 and went again. And when that chance come, and look, it's fortunate the way it fell to Waters. But how many times do you see with so much at stake and in front of the crowd and the atmosphere, that shot gets snatched or it's not struck properly or whatever, and he executed it. And I just, well, I mean, I still can't believe it that you are 3-2 up in a big game. It's a local derby, and in the 6 minute stoppage time, your centre halves bombing on one-on-one with a keeper to make it 4-2. I don't think I've ever seen that. I don't know what Michael Duff's reaction would have been if he hadn't scored, but he did, and that. I kind of hope that moment goes down in folklore because it's incredible. I've never seen a centre half do that when they're defending a 1-goal lead. In that kind of, it reminded me like Tony. You remember, like, there was one game where Arsenal won the title, and all of a sudden Tony Adams was like running through. They beat Everton or someone, and he smashed it in. That was at 2-0 up. This was at 3-2. And Kitchen's running through. What on with the keeper? I'm doing the comms. I'm thinking, I just had enough time to just check that's the right number there. Yeah, it's Kitchen. And like, just what a moment and incredible. So look, what a game that was.
We might as well talk about Kitchen a little bit. We were saying earlier one with Ian that I can't remember him having like a bad game. He seems to have just improved enormously under Michael Duff, and he does do these. He reminds me. I know. He reminds me of a dog we once had. When we took it to training, he would never listen. He would always run off and bring a stick. And then you're like, oh, that's really clever. And he's one of them where he's probably been told, keep it tight. But then he goes on a run and he scored a couple of goals. I mean, it reminded me a bit of Angus MacDonald. When was it? Whatever, when he scored in front of the Puntian to make it, to equalise, quite a few years ago. And we can talk about a lot of Barnsley players that, are performing really, really well. But the defence, the three at the back, Kitchen, Anderson, Bobby Thomas in on loan was almost thrown in. It's probably one of the best backline for Barnsley that I've seen in quite. We've always had one or two really good, but this is just a different level again, isn't it?
It is, and we were saying off air. I mean, fair play to Kitchen. I thought he was a little bit thrown to last season in the Championship. Played in that side, and it was just horrendous. And he was one of the players who suffered with the confidence. But this season, he's gone to another level. I know we've dropped down a division, but his all-round game now is superb. And I was saying, wasn't I, that against Wickham, a couple of times he appeared in their penalty area, and the Wickham commentary were like, "Well, where's he come from? He's a centre half." They weren't expecting it. So he has got this form for kind of like you say, he's probably one of them like greyhound that just sees something in the distance and goes running after it. He's always good for a bit of a silly yellow card, but I can't fault his passion. But that back three complements each other really well. We've always said Mads Anderson was the rock at the back, but I thought Bobby Thomas put his body on the line massively on Tuesday night, and he's been a great acquisition. And I said to you, Carlo, I said when Tom Edwards went back to Stoke injured in January, I was gutted because he was a cracking loan buy, and he looked really good. I thought we'll miss him, but they went and got Bobby Thomas, and them three have gelled really well. And then with Isted has just walked into that side and looks like he's been here a couple of years in goal. So yeah, it is a cracking back three at the minute.
It was billed, Rob, as almost like the battle of the midfield. I mean, again, rivalry aside, if you're going to look at a team of the season, I think whatever team you support in League One, I think Barry Bannon will be in probably, or deserves to be in 90 or 95% because he is just an absolute class player. Barnsley, no, Luke O'Connell, who's more like the up and coming, Herbie Kane, a different Herbie Kane. Beginning of the season, Steve, who's at the NAC, wondering why there's no Doug Crufts this year. He said that he earned a living of one good season at Doncaster. He's definitely turned that around. I mean, you've commented on Barnsley for a while, Rob. Herbie Kane looks a different player than he did last season. And what did you make of the midfield? How did you see that going? Barry Bannon's got that quality, hasn't there? But Luke O'Connell for Barnsley, a firm fan's favourite, not afraid to tackle. Was it won and lost in the midfield, or was it more the game plans that worked in Barnsley's favour with that high press and forcing sort of like Wednesday on the back foot?
I think it was won and lost more in the case of the way that Barnsley started the game. They just, the pressing, and they made life uncomfortable for Wednesday. They got 2 goals. And then Wednesday always had to chase the game. And I think what Michael Duff said at the end was quite fitting, was that the ages of the two teams was quite different. And we mentioned this before we went on air for this from 7 o'clock, that when we got the team sheet, you looked at Barnsley's bench and you thought, there's 3 or 4 that you could see coming on there and having an impact. And you looked at Wednesday's bench and you thought, I don't know which player he's going to bring on here, Darren Moore. And Moore made one change, and it was a predictable change to bring Deli Bashiru on. That's all he had. There was no options for Darren Moore, and Michael Duff had those young legs, and obviously one of the strikers who's come on has scored. And I think it was the way that Barnsley started, and then the impact players that came off the bench that won it. But I thought it was a great battle in midfield. I think Barnsley won the battle overall. I still think Bannon had a great game. Some of the passes and crosses and the long range passing he did was great. I always enjoy watching Will Vaulks, but I do think Wednesday missed George Byers, and I don't know when he's going to be back. But I thought Barnsley won that battle. I thought the funny thing is the 2 players who I enjoyed the most, which is strange given that it was a 6-goal game, was in fact Kitchen. I just like the way he plays. He's an aggressive player. I like seeing aggression and full blood. I loved that at the Plymouth game where there was that sort of battle in the midfield, and then he'd come flying in and that tackle at the end, and everyone was chanting Yorkshire. That made my season. That's the moment of the season for me. I loved I felt like chanting Yorkshire myself from the press box. Loved every second of that. And that's just the way he plays. I like that. And the other player that was Famewo for Wednesday. He was in the opposite side of the pitch. I thought he had a good game. And it was funny that they were the 2 players that I was most impressed with. And the defenders conceded 6 between them. But no, midfield good. And look, can we also have a mention for that save from Eisted? I mean, that was an incredible passage of play where you've got, the defenders throwing themselves into blocks. You've got 2 massive blocks. Then Bannon pulls out, an inch perfect cross. Smith did everything right with his header. And I still don't know how I've watched that save back over and over again. You don't see a ball headed as powerfully as that. I've no idea how usually that would go through a keeper might get a touch to it. It might flick it over the bar, or he might flick it in. It might come off the fingers and go in, but he actually got it miles away from it. It was like got such a powerful hand behind it. It's an exceptional save. I mean, I don't know. It's League One football, but that's a world-class save from Eisted. You have to give credit for that. And there were just so many little moments like that just made the game. You sat there and thought, this is brilliant. How many games do you sit there and there's like nothing happening and you're bored and it's cold and you just want to finish, get to half time, so go and have a bovril. And in this game, it was like at half time, it was like, I didn't want this to stop. There were just so many moments like that. So that's a long-winded way of saying that I think the way that the Barnsley subs impacted the game was key.
Question to you both then. Football match aside, results aside, we don't go again this weekend. Obviously, Wednesday do. Rob, I'll let you go first. We're coming to the business end of the season for both, because let's be honest, let's give some credit. The top 2 go up automatically. One makes it through the playoffs. I think there's a good chance that both these teams will play in that championship next season. I'll be honest, and I think Barnsley will go up, but it will be through the playoffs, and I think Wednesday will nick that automatic playoff spot. How do you see it going? What and I know it's a bit like Mystic Meg, and what do you think? But you've seen Sheffield Wednesday throughout the season. You've seen Barnsley. I think it's clear enough. We've got the talent, but can they continue this to the business end and actually, make it back the first time of asking? And do you think Wednesday can stay where they are, or maybe retake that top spot and go up automatic?
So the thing that helps Wednesday is the games they've got coming up next. If they were playing, the Ipswichers or the Derbies and people like that, I think they might be a bit of bother because these injuries are going to hurt. But they've got Forest Green on Sunday, then they played Cheltenham. They've got Lincoln at home, Oxford away, Accrington Stanley at home, Burton away, and then Bristol Rovers and Exeter. Their next hardest game, really, if we were being honest about it, it's probably the 29th of April against Shrewsbury, that you'd sort of go, well, they could easily drop points there. And look, that's not to say Wednesday are going to win all these games, but they've been on a 23-game unbeaten run because they've kind of handled the business for the most part. So I think that will help Wednesday, and I think they will win automatic promotion from the position they're in. I think even though Plymouth are top, Ipswich had just been in such a good run of form that that I'd be worried if I was Plymouth, because Ipswich are the closest to them. I still think Barnsley can get in there. Barnsley have pummeled Plymouth and have now scored 4 against Sheffield Wednesday. you know, how it's more than just a win. You know, they didn't win both games 1-0, you know, on a penalty or an own goal. You know, they've actually gone and took the game to these teams. I don't think there's any reason why Barnsley can't win their game in hand to draw level with Ipswich, and then it's a battle, isn't it? You know, they'll both have a game in hand over Plymouth. I could see it coming right down to the wire. I think the one thing I will say is I think if Wednesday drop into the playoffs, I'd worry for Wednesday because they've been up there for so long. It's the same with Sheffield United. If they drop into the playoffs, it will be a massive disappointment. And I could see them being the sort of favourites who get knocked out in the semis. Yeah. If Barnsley have to settle for the playoffs, I just think they'll be carrying so much momentum from what they've had in the second half of the season that I actually agree with you. I think that would lead to promotion anyway. So my prediction is, I think, yes, both in the Championship. It's also what I want to happen, both in the Championship. I think it will happen, but I think perhaps I agree with you that maybe Barnsley will have to do it via the playoffs, but who doesn't enjoy a win at Wembley?
Yeah. And Ian, that game we've got, that was going to be played on Saturday. I mean, you can have a discussion, should we have played Ipswich? While you're on this run, do you want to just continue and bring these big teams to Oakwell to try and get 3 or 4 goals past them? Because we did it to Plymouth, we did it, we did it to Portsmouth, Wednesday, obviously it's not because of international call-ups that then turn out to be not international call-ups because one of them hasn't made the squad. It is what it is. Is that going to be key to see if Barnsley could maybe get automatic or have to, maybe try and aim for the playoffs? That game we've got coming up against Ipswich, is that going to be the key one?
Rob called it right when he said momentum, and we have got the momentum, and I think we've probably got enough of momentum to go on now and probably get automatic. I think realistically, if I was a betting man, I'd probably say might just make the playoffs because we have a couple of tough games. But like I said to you off air, Carlo, I said December, maybe even early January. If I thought we'd stay in the playoffs, I thought we'd be 6th, 5th, and I always thought if we had 2 games against Bolton or 2 games against Derby, I wouldn't like to have called it. I wouldn't have been mega confident. If we had a semi-final, 2 games against Bolton or Ipswich or Derby now, especially with the atmosphere at Oakwell and the way we're playing, I wouldn't fear any of them. And I think the momentum would go on, and we'd go all the way through, I think, and win it. So even if we don't come in that top 2, if we carry on the way we're playing, I wouldn't fear anybody in the playoffs now.
Oh, you're on mute, Carlo. Can I change my answer, by the way?
Yeah, of course you can. Of course you can.
Because I've had a look, actually, and I should have looked at this. I've just noticed that Barnsley are playing pretty much everybody that Sheffield Wednesday are playing. So I actually think and they're playing Ipswich on the 25th, aren't they? So in a month's time. That's the game. I reckon that's going to end up being automatic promotion decider. It's at Oakwell. Bring it on. What a night that's going to be. And I think Barnsley will win that game, and it'll be a Wednesday Barnsley top 2. That's what I'm going for.
And for football fans in South Yorkshire, you almost want to say you don't want Sheffield United to go up, because then we'd have the whole of South Yorkshire in one league, which would be amazing, obviously excluding Doncaster, but it is what it is. Barnsley back in action Tuesday night. A lot of say it's only Exeter. Remember, they came and within a minute were 1-0 up, and we ended up losing that match. So I'm sure the game plan that he talks about and the focus that he's given to these players, you have to look at that and hope they can come away with another win away on the road. Rob, thank you very much, not only for your insight, but also for your honesty. And I just love, listen, I love talking to Ian and Steve, but sometimes it's nice to bring somebody on with a bit of new energy, bit of knowledge, because Steve would have talked about
what they're talking about.
That's another way of saying it. But no, thank you very much. If it is a Wembley, is that going to be a difficult decision in the office? Because Gids will say, I've worked here for 36 years, I'm going. And then Adam is like, yeah, but I was part-time before I became full-time. And you're saying, I went, and I went home, but I came back. Or is it just the whole 3 of you are going because that's the sort of match I suppose you want to be at, don't you? Whether that's be for Sheffield United, whether that be for Barnsley.
Yeah, the Wembley days are always a bit special. If it is to be a playoff final, involving any of the teams, we will all go to that and divvy out the roles. So yeah, but we'll all be there if it needs to be that. And you know, at the end of the day, I get the final say, so I'll make the whatever I want. No, I'm joking. No, I'm kidding about that. So no, but we'll all be there, and you know, it'll be a lot of fun. So it was the last time Barnsley were at Wembley and I was there. I did a 3-hour show on Wembley Way, and it went really smoothly into the last 5 minutes when a Millwall fan came bounding over and dropped an F-bomb live on Radio Sheffield. And then as I was walking in, they decided to start throwing bottles at anybody who looked like they were north of Watford Gaps. So I had to like run into the stadium after that. But you know, the job was done on the pitch. So let's hope for a similar result if it ends up being that.
Yeah, I don't know what's it, but it is the same feeling though, isn't it? Can you remember the 2016 season where we went to Wembley twice, and after Christmas it felt like you were happy to face anybody because there was that unity. We had a really good manager, and look what happened. And it feels, you know, the good days are coming back, aren't they, Ian?
They are, yes. And I think we're sort of peaking at the right time, business end of the season, 10, 11 games to go. And like Rob said, you see it in every league, don't you? There's a team that does really, really well and then has a bad run, has a stinker right at the end of the season and drops into the playoffs and don't get through. And then you get a team that sometimes come from nowhere with a great run, get in the playoffs on the last game of the season and go up. As long as we can hit, if it is going to be the playoffs, if we can be where we are pretty much now with that run, that momentum, free of injury, I think we'll be fine. I really do.
Lots to look forward to. You've been listening to the Reds Report. Thank you very much to Rob Staton. Thank you very much, as always, to Ian from the Tigers blog. We'll be back next week talking about those valuable 3 points won away on the road in Exeter. Steve should be back, unless he's still looking for Crofts. Nobody tell him that it was a couple of weeks ago. Sponsored by the Best of Barnsley and part of the TalkSport network of fans. You've been listening to the Reds Report. Thank you.